You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Liv Constantine.
Well, thanks for tuning in to Author Stories today. We've got a fantastic show for you. Go to hankgarner.com and subscribe to the show. Any way that you download podcasts, you can listen to it there. I'd like to talk about some sponsors before we get started. Scribophile is a respectful online writing workshop and writers community. Writers of all skill levels join to improve each other's work with thoughtful critiques and by sharing their writing experience. We're the writing group to join if you want to find beta readers, get the best feedback around, learn how to get published, and be part of the friendliest and most successful writing workshop online. Improve your writing by receiving detailed critiques, learn from a vast collection of free writing resources, make lifelong friends in our busy community of writers. Writing is a solitary art, but that doesn't mean you have to be lonely. Lucky for you, there are thousands of writers on Scribophile every day, and we're a really friendly bunch. You've never seen a writing group like this one. Join Scribophile today at scribophile.com. For the Words is a unique writing motivator unlike anything I've ever seen. For the Words is an online writing platform which motivates writers of all backgrounds to increase their word count through gamification. Writing can be challenging, especially when you need to consistently produce a high output of words. By injecting a little fun into that routine and using daily rewards to promote a healthy writing habit, For the Words makes it easier to reach those word count goals. We're a community of bloggers, professional authors, college and high school students, research scientists, gamers, and first-time writers from all over the world. Come for the words, stay for the fun. It's forthewords.com. That's the number 4, thewords.com. Writers. The internet is one of the best tools for research and creativity, but it can also be one of the biggest hindrances to productivity, distracting you from doing the seat-in-chair, hand-on-keyboard work. Rescue Time gives you an accurate picture of how you spend your time to help you become more productive every day. Spot inefficiencies in your day and become better at managing your time. Create a goal, like spending less than 1 hour per day on email, to help you stay focused. Set an alarm to tell you when you spent more than 2 hours a day on Facebook. Try Rescue Time and use our special discount code for 30% off our Rescue Time premium account by going to rescuetime.com/authorstories. Let us help you rescue your time. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have a sister writing team, Lynne and Valerie Constantine. They write under the pseudonym Liv Constantine, and they have a fantastic new book out called The Last Time I Saw You. And, you know, the problem with having so many great authors on is each week I'm like, oh gosh, this is the summer book to have. And they have done it again. They keep moving my list. So welcome to the show, Lynne and Valerie.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful to be with you.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to have you guys. We begin each show with the same question. And that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller? Valerie, why don't you begin, please?
Oh, right. Okay, we're both looking at each other like, who's going to start? Thank you. I think it probably was in school when I was in elementary school. And, of course, one of the big things was how many books can you read? Checking off books for the year and seeing who read the most books. And I remember having one other classmate who felt like I was always in competition with to see which one of us could do more books. And at the same time, we were also writing stories. So I think this probably goes back to maybe 5th grade and just having such a fun time writing stories of my own. while I was reading. And I think that the two just go together so much. Reading and writing are sort of inseparable for me. So it goes way, way back for me.
Was there a particular series or character that just really jumped out at you and captured your imagination?
Absolutely. Without question, it was Nancy Drew. And I just couldn't wait. Each time I got either, as a birthday gift or Christmas, got a new book in the series. It was so incredible. And then, of course, those books got passed on to Lynne, who is younger than I am. And she would just cross my name out and put her name in. And she kept all the Nancy Drew books.
And then I got my own new ones. My father used to take me once a week. We would go to the department store, back when department stores had restaurants in them and books and toys,
Right.
And we would I would look forward to every week getting the new Nancy Drew book. So it's a favorite for both of us. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nancy Drew has been responsible for making more writers than anyone that I know. I'll tell you what. Oh, man, if there were, if I had $1 for every time a guest said, "Oh, Nancy Drew, absolutely," then, and I had an older sister. She's or I have an older sister. She's about 1.5 years older, and she was a huge Nancy Drew fan, and I got those books handed down to me, and,
Did you like them?
Oh, I loved them. I was, and we passed, and then I would collect Hardy Boys, and then we would switch them back and forth, and it was, I was the kid that marked her name out and put my name in.
Right.
Oh, what about you, Lynne? What's your first memory?
My first memory is more oral storytelling, and I remember my best friend and I would get together and play with all of our dolls, not even Barbies, but we used to have, when my parents would travel, they would always bring back dolls from different places, and so I remember sitting on the floor and coming up with these really soap opera-ish stories about the different people and the maid who was having an affair with the husband, and the wife was getting upset.
How old were you then?
Probably also elementary school, but I can still see this one doll, Spanish doll, going around, and they would all be arguing. So I think always have liked to tell stories, and and also always played the game of what if or would you rather. We would spend hours saying or concocting horrible scenarios for people to choose from, and things like that.
That's interesting, because now that you say that, I remember I'm the oldest in the family. Lynne is the baby, and we have 2 brothers between us. So the next brother is 5 years younger than I am, and I remember telling him stories at night that I was a spy. And I had this private plane, and at night I would fly to Russia, and I would take him with me each night if he would go to bed and he would behave or whatever. And the next morning he would say, What happened? We didn't go. And I would tell him, "Oh, you were sleeping." And he believed it. And then the next brother came along, and I told him the same story, and he just totally called BS on it, and that blew it.
Oh, that is so funny. That is so funny. So did either of you guys, go on? Did you know that you were going to be a professional writer one day? Was the draw, a lot of us had this desire early on, but then life gets in the way and you kind of come back around to writing. But there are a few people who kind of have that clear vision and pursue it all the way through and know that through high school and college, this is what I'm going to do. And they just never let go of that. Did either one of you have that experience?
No, I think we both went in the other direction, which was just sort of falling into careers. And I studied psychology in college, and I thought at first I wanted to be a psychologist. I toyed also with being a lawyer, and then I ended up in business and in marketing in the corporate world. And so I always, even through those years of working and doing, well in my profession, I never loved it. I enjoyed my job, but at night I would try to write. But then, of course, life gets in the way, and the novel that is supposed to take a year takes 20 years. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until much later, after I had my children, and I was, took a break from the corporate world, that I began trying to get back into writing. So, if you would ask my husband, he would say, "Yeah, you've always been a writer and have always wanted." But it's probably been the past 7 years that I've really pursued it consistently.
Yeah, I would agree. This is Valerie. And I've always loved writing, but I really never thought that I would be able to actually make a career, make a living, be able to pay my bills by writing books, even though I think in the back of my mind it was some sort of a wonderful fantasy, like, wouldn't that be great? And I've always been just sort of struck by the people who say, oh, I knew from the time I could write when I was 6 years old that this is what I was going to do, and just pursued it from that time on. But I think it's rare. Yeah, I think. But
yeah, I think it is. It's like I said, we've done almost 650 of these shows, and it's the rare individual who says that they only ever wanted to be a writer, and that's the only thing they ever pursued. I think for most of us, it's, you go out, you live life, you get some experience, and not that it doesn't work the other way, but that just seems to be the path. What was the first, well, first off, Lynne, you also write a series of novels under the name L.C. Shaw. Which came first, your collaboration as Liv or the L.C. Shaw books?
Well, sort of both. So, I mean, the collaboration began first but not as Liv. So Valerie and I wrote over 20 years ago a book together called Circle Dance using Lynne Constantine and Valerie Constantine. And that was our first effort. We hadn't taken a writing class, other than maybe formally in school. And it was really a story, it's fiction, but a story about our heritage. We're both Greek, and we wanted to just leave a legacy for our children. So we wrote that book, and then we both got busy. I moved away. I had my children. I moved to Connecticut. Val stayed in Maryland. And then we came back together again and began writing together. But at the same time, it's sort of on a parallel path. I was writing a conspiracy thriller under my name, Lynne Constantine. And that has turned into the series that HarperCollins has now acquired, which is the Jack Logan series under L.C. Shaw. So, like I said, it's kind of, they all sort of mesh together, but the collaboration came first. But the Liv collaboration began with The Last Mrs. Parrish.
Right.
Okay, I love my sister dearly. We are, we were two kids that, we were very close in age, and we were, thick as thieves. We're both book lovers. We both love a lot of the same kinds of books. I would never want to collaborate with her.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. What was it? I mean, this seems like something that's gone back, like you said, 20 years. Like, what was the draw to collaborate between the two of you? That is a rare situation, rarer indeed than just collaboration, but that you guys have wanted to do that for so long.
Well, we've always been really close, and we have a great time together. We have a lot of fun together. So there isn't a feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to spend time with my sister and I have to sit down and write with her. It's really fun. And I have to say, when we now, after Mrs. Parrish, and as we've worked on subsequent books, we've taken the opportunity to get away maybe for a week together in a small little, cabin or something. And I mean, I think I laugh more during those 6 or 7 days that we spend together. We'll read something that's been written really jerkily and laugh at ourselves. Right. And the fun part of it hasn't left. And I think if we weren't having fun doing it, I don't think we would do it.
Right. I think that's true.
We feel very blessed and very lucky that we have that kind of relationship. Not to say that there aren't disagreements and times that, we both might be in a crummy mood.
Right.
But for the most part, it's really good.
Yeah.
You say?
I would completely echo that. Yes, definitely. And I think too, when we were especially starting out and going through the trenches and of rejection, it was always so encouraging, at any time, maybe when one would feel not like they were really going to give up, but kind of like giving up, the other one can say no, and encourage. So yeah. we can share the ups and downs, which is really great.
Mm-hmm. And share the writing, which is great too.
Definitely.
You mentioned Mrs. Parrish a minute ago, and this book, when it hit the scene a couple of years ago, gained almost immediate attention, some really serious attention. This book was kind of deliciously evil in a lot of ways. Where did this book come from? I ask writers sometimes the old cliche question, where do you get your ideas from? That's kind of a boring question because ideas are everywhere. But what fascinates me is what is it about the idea when it kind of bubbles to the top that okay, this is magic. This is what comes to you guys first? Is it a premise? Is it a character? How do these stories usually begin to grow?
So definitely character. I mean, I can still picture in my mind when we got the idea for the last Mrs. Parrish, and I was visiting Valerie, not on a work thing, but just visiting, and we were walking in her neighborhood, and we were just talking about, as you do, about different situations, and we were discussing that whole thing of women who target wealthy men, women who are like working for a man and decide that they're going to marry him even though he's already married. And we're going on, and as we were discussing it, we looked at each other and said, well, what if such and such happened? And we both said, that's it. That's our next book. So with Mrs. Parrish, we knew the twist immediately, which it doesn't always happen. For that book, we knew the ending, and then we developed, and we knew, of course, the Amber character because that's what sparked it. But it's usually an idea of what we want to explore. So in this book, The Last Time I Saw You, the idea was friendship. And, looking at two very, very close friends and what happens when there is a rift that severs that close friendship, and then something happens to bring them back together. Can that ever be really repaired and discovered? So even though this is a psychological thriller and a murder mystery with lots of twists and turns, really underneath all of it is this friendship story of two women.
Right. Yes, relationships, I would say. Mm-hmm. Looks at a lot of things, marriage, secrets, the
mother-daughter relationship.
Right, friendships, yeah.
Lynne, you said that you studied psychology, and did you practice? Did you work in psychology?
No, I wanted to. I was I had an undergrad in human development, and then when I went for my master's, I was going to get it in counseling. And I guess after my first year and taking more classes, I came to the realization that I did not want to sit in a room and listen to people's problems all day. So I switched my major to business, and so now we just write about other people's problems, but then we can be finished and move on.
Solve it.
Yeah.
Right. Do you ever draw back on the things that you encountered in school and think, this would be a great disorder to put on someone and see how this plays out?
Yeah, well, I think the sociopath, we're all fascinated with that, whether you want to call it a psycho-socio antisocial personality. So that is a character that we seem to explore over and over in different shades and different parts of the spectrum. But I also have a very close friend who is a clinical psychologist, and so we go to her a lot for research and to make sure that we're on the right track, because it's been a while since I've taken those psychology classes.
Well, characters like that, like you mentioned, the sociopath and the all of these very strange type people are really fascinating us in our in kind of a meta way right now. There's lots of books where we're just devouring these kinds of stories. Is there something going on with us as readers that we just craving these stories of jacked up people? Is this a trend that has to do with us readers that you can tell?
I think that if you go back in time, that readers have always been fascinated by this. We go back to Shakespeare and look at the characters who are extremely flawed and sociopaths and murderers. And I just think that that's human nature. I think we're fascinated by this little touch of evil or a touch of sociopath behavior. I don't think it's something new. And I remember one of our editors saying to us, readers want to read about things people doing things that they would never do. But it's still sort of a secret door into this other world that we really don't want to live in reality, but we love to look at and see. And I think it's something that's always been.
I would agree, and I think that probably the major shift that I think that has been seen is in this domestic thriller genre or domestic noir, is that we're seeing more women who are flawed, and not even just the women who are the antagonists, but we're seeing protagonists who now women are allowed to be. You don't have to be perfect anymore, and you can be the main character, and whether you drink too much or whether you're, I don't know, whatever those characteristics are or flaws are that people would hide before. I think people are not really so interested in this perfect person where, however many years ago, maybe your main character was gorgeous and thin and perfect and nice, and people are saying that's not reality, and so I think that's a big shift since Gone Girl that we've seen, and it seems to be a trend that's continuing with this an unlikable character. You used to have to say, well, you must like the main character, and I don't think that's the case anymore.
I agree.
Well, there's been a whole industry in writing that's kind of built up around this making likable characters, and the whole save the cat thing. If you have an unlikable character, have them save a cat, in the first scene, and then you immediately build this rapport with the character, and thank God we're moving away from that. We want to see ourselves in our fiction in some way, and sometimes the mirror that we turn is not always great, but I think it helps us to connect with ourselves more.
Yes, I would agree.
Yes, I think you're right about that. And I think readers connect to that because you're seeing something that's familiar and sometimes distressing.
The Last Mrs. Parrish got a lot of attention. It was picked as one of Reese Witherspoon's book club picks, and People Magazine, I think, lots of attention. How did that feel? That the first book that you guys put out together, except for the one previously that you did years ago, how did that feel? That you do this thing and then it gains all this attention. What was that feeling like?
It was so gratifying and surprising. I mean, we loved the book and we felt like it was a good book, but we also were aware, there are a lot of great books out there, and the odds of getting attention, we really considered it a blessing because no matter how hard you work or how good your work is, you don't always get the reach that you would like to. So we're, so fortunate that we have an amazing team at HarperCollins that just, that are heart and soul behind us with the book and do so much. And we have a terrific agent that we love. So I think it's really, not to sound corny, but it really is this team effort. I mean, it's, because it's not enough to just write a good book, but you really need, these champions to take you through. And we just look at each other all the time and say, gosh, we're so lucky. I mean, and we're thankful, we thank God really for everything that has happened.
Yes, it's been amazing. Mm-hmm. It's been amazing and surprising.
Yeah.
And just pretty phenomenal, really. I don't think we ever expected to this degree.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
We talk a lot on the show about the real gift that anonymity is with that first book, that no one knows you're writing a book, no one's expecting anything from you, and that's it's really a special season in a writer's life because you can never get that back. Once the first one's out there, all sorts of expectations come with that. But you have followed that first book up with a book that is that I think is even better, is even more even more twisted, in a good way. And I'm smiling when I say that. The Last Time I Saw You is a phenomenal book full of characters that don't do what you think that they're going to do. How do you follow up something with as much success and as many accolades as you got with The Last Mrs. Parrish with a book this strong and The Last Time I Saw You?
Well, you're right. I mean, it was, we definitely felt and still do feel a lot of pressure. So again, we just really had to work very hard at it. I mean, we knew that the book that we had to come out that our readers would be expecting something, as good or maybe even better, which they're so different. So it's almost like, your children or whatever. You can't really compare them in terms of what is better. They're different. But we worked very hard at the editing process with this book. We went through many, many different iterations. We worked extremely closely with our phenomenal editor. And, even when we thought we were finished with this, really she took us through one more round, which I think made the difference in the finished product, really hopefully taking up to that next level. So, it is, because we do see, already in reviews, people they do compare, and I guess that's inevitable. Right. But hopefully people will find something in this book that's as unique and speaks to them and as compelling as The Last Mrs. Parrish. So we just try to keep writing the next book and focusing on that and then putting it out there and hoping it does well.
Yeah, but you are absolutely right. I think we felt the pressure of working on this book every single day.
Yeah,
and just hoping that we were going to be able to please readers and have something that they would enjoy. And now we are working on book number 3, and I think that's been a little bit
much easier.
Easier, yeah.
Much easier.
Yeah. Way easier.
Everybody says that sophomore book is like, right. So now that's behind us, so we're happy about that. Right.
Well, folks just need to realize it's a different book. It's different characters. It's each book has to be its own thing, and to people need to relax a little bit, and just enjoy it for what. That's all I'm going to say about that. I could go on a rant.
If it had followed the same sort of arc or trajectory, then people might be saying, "Gosh, can they write
a different book?"
Yeah.
There's a handful of people that would have said, "Okay, I just wanted more Last Mrs. Parrish," and that's wonderful.
Yes, right.
But you can only do that so many times,
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk about this book. So Dr. Kate English, who is Kate, and what do we find going on when the book opens?
Kate is the protagonist. She's a very successful surgeon in a wonderful marriage, has a terrific daughter. Well, the marriage isn't too wonderful. It started out wonderful, but it's a little on shaky legs right now.
Yeah.
But she comes from, the setting is Baltimore, and Kate comes from a family of generational wealth. It's sort of the old money in contrast to Parrish, where the money was very, everything was flashy and ostentatious. This is very quiet, riding to the hunt, exclusive country clubs, and sort of society, good name, social register kind of thing. And Kate finds herself in a situation where her mother has been murdered, and then she begins to receive threatening messages and little packages, and pointing to the fact that she might be the next victim. She has a best friend who she's been estranged from for 15 years, Blaire Barrington, and Blaire comes back because she also was very close to the mother, whose name is Lily, comes back for the funeral, discovers what's going on with Kate and who's being threatened, and so they together try to discern and find the killer and who is threatening Kate. So that's sort of the premise that's where the book starts.
Now, as opposed to the previous book with Mrs. Parrish, you mentioned that the first book was very flashy and ostentatious with the kind of new money feel and this social climber aspect. And with the new book, it's kind of the opposite. You've got a different tone in the way the characters operate, in the way that motivations are spelled out. Was that a conscious effort from the beginning that, okay, we're gonna completely flip the tables and tell a different kind of story? Kind of talk me through the how that setting and the characters' motivations began to flesh out.
Sure. Yes, we wanted this to be a world in which money was not the entree, but really more birth and family background. So in this book, when Parrish, you had the two women, you had one wanting to come in and just because she wanted the money. In this, you have two close friends who have a falling out. And Blaire does not come from the same world that Kate comes from. Blaire comes from just an average, yes, her family has some money, but she's from a small town in New Hampshire. And in that town, her family was very well known and philanthropic. But when she's sent to this boarding school in Baltimore, people know each other. People in Baltimore have lived there for a long time. Most of the families stay there. So it's, I don't want to say it's cliquish, but it can be a little bit closed because people have had their friends forever. So she arrives on the scene in middle school, and Kate has her circle of friends, and Kate is very welcoming to her, but the other girls, not as much. And over the years, Blaire, even though she can hold her own pretty much financially, she discovers that there are things she just doesn't know she doesn't know. So whether it's one example is she's having dinner at Kate's and someone asks her to pass the salt, and she just passes one shaker, and Lily pulls her aside later and says to her, it's polite when someone asks you for the salt, you pass both. These are just these small little things that she wasn't raised with that separate her, even though she can afford to be in the school and that. So when she comes back to Baltimore after having not seen anyone for 15 years, she comes back not so much as an outsider anymore because now she's a famous writer. Her books have been made into TV shows, and she's in a rarefied atmosphere now of Hollywood that her friends are not. So it sort of evens. She's not feeling below. However, the other thing we explore with the book is that even though these are women, approaching 40 and they're successful, all of them in their chosen professions, coming back together, when these high school women get back together, all those insecurities bubble back to the surface. And they're dealing with positioning and who's Kate's best friend, and who looks better, and who's thinner, and this and that. So I think that there are more subtleties, I think, in this book, and things are expressed more beyond the surface than probably Mrs. Parrish.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. There's some big themes or ideas that we kind of wrestle with through this book, and like you mentioned, these old relationships and the how it's so easy to drag up these adolescent fears and social jockeying and all of that stuff. It really plays a great part in the book. And philanthropy, you mentioned also, is an interesting idea in the book because we've got these old money people, and they're doing wonderful things on the surface, and yet the motivations are not always great. How did you kind of begin to work those things into the story?
Well, we tried to do a combination of characters. Like some of the characters are genuinely, like Lily, genuinely was a philanthropist and with good intentions. And then you have Gordon, who's been, family friend forever, who's sort of a creepy, weird, friend, but that loyalty prevents Kate from sort of pushing out of her life, even though he's strange. And then you have Kate's husband, Simon, who now acts as though he's Lord of the Manor, but it really doesn't come from that. And so he doesn't necessarily want to spend the money the way that Kate wants to spend it. And, I think maybe you have a little bit of a Parrish element with Simon when you say.
I think so. And I think that, and I think it's often true of families who have had money for generations and have really an abundance of it, that we say it in the book, that even Kate is raised, and so is Lily, to understand that they have an obligation to give back, that they're so fortunate with what they've been given through no really talent or work of their own. It's just been inherited, and that it's incumbent upon them to give back to the world in some way.
Right. And so, but then you have Selby, and who's also from that same world, who is more ostentatious and wants to use her money to look good and to show off, and her mother, Georgina. So, I think it's just, regardless of what socioeconomic strata anyone comes from, there's going to be a mixed bag of people with good intentions, bad intentions, and,
Yeah. like Lynne. No, just kidding.
Good intentions. And Val.
Oh, so funny, so funny. The with Mrs. Parrish, you said that you guys were walking and talking and came up with this great twist and hook for the end, and then kind of plotted the book backward from there to get you. How did the last time I saw you come to be? Was it a similar situation, or did you approach it completely differently?
Well, I think one of the interesting things we did approach it a little bit differently. We always start with a pretty general idea and a very, very loose outline because we like being able to, we don't want to be constricted by an outline that's very deliberate, where the characters can't move around and do their thing. So one of the interesting things in writing this was that the killer changed. Probably the third or fourth iteration of the book. Yes.
Oh wow!
Which really changed a lot of other things.
Yeah.
So we had to do a lot of rewriting and changing things around. So in that sense, I think this book was much more learn as we go along what the characters are going to do. With Parrish, we had to go back and, do a little bit of nuancing. But with this, we were much more sure, I think, of where we were going.
Yeah, I think these characters took longer for us to get to know. And
sure.
We knew Parrish, we knew those characters, and they almost came to us fully formed. And the last time I saw you, what we thought was true because, and Kate, Kate suffers from anxiety, and that's another issue that we delve into in the book. And of course, as things happen, her anxiety intensifies. And when the book first began, she was more of that perfect, sort of can do everything, efficient. And we thought, no, that's kind of boring. And as we got to know her, then she showed herself to be this person that had overcome anxiety, but still struggled with it. And, all of those things. So it was definitely much more of a process. And so that it did require a lot of going back and changing things. But now, by the time we finished, we really felt like we knew them very well.
Mm-hmm. And I think with this also, and just to add on in terms of the characters and getting to know them, every character had to have a motive and be suspect. So that brought a whole another area of shading to each character. So that was a little different also from Parrish.
Well, one thing that I was going to mention earlier was that this book has a very Agatha Christie kind of feel in that anyone could be it all the way to the end, and kept me guessing, and which says so much about your character development, and I'm glad that you just talked about that because it definitely feels like that there's not a single character in this book who is a disposable character. Everyone, there are stakes for every one of them, and it's fantastic. Do you find yourselves agreeing on or having heated discussions about some of those big character decisions, like you said that the killer changed on like the fourth iteration of the book? How does a decision like that come to be when there's two of you and working through that?
So it's interesting. We don't, and we're always knocking on wood. We typically come to the same conclusion, and after writing together so much, oftentimes, if we're working on an edit and we're both being quiet, and then we'll come up with the same sentence or even the same name. So we do a lot of discussing. So if we get, this is another great thing about writing together is that as we're kind of in the trenches and trying to figure out what's going to happen and what the next twist is, we just talk about it. And we might even, and we'll go round and round. And a lot of times one of us will say one thing, the other will build on it, or we'll jokingly say, or we could do this such and such. And then we'll go, yeah, that actually is a good idea. So we work our way into it. And I have to say that's one of the things that I found challenging now that I've been writing with Valerie so much, writing this other solo thing. I called her. I said, this is terrible. I have nobody to talk to about this plot. She said, well, you could still talk to me about it. But yeah, you really, I think it adds such a good level of depth to be able to collaborate, because nobody knows your characters like your co-author and knows the story. So you don't have to say, oh, let me run this by you to an outside person. You have to give all this background, but we're both so involved in it. So it really, I think it takes it to the next level because we discuss it so much.
It's true. And I think, and in terms of how the killer changed, we had the killer, and there was something that seemed like it just wasn't working. As we got further and further into the book and started expanding, we were going off onto some tangents, I think, that didn't seem to come back together and get woven together. And I don't even remember which one of us said, what if we make blah, 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 the killer?
Right.
And we happened to be on the phone with our editor at the time when we were discussing it. And everybody said, yes, that's perfect.
That's the killer.
And that's what, but it felt like we were getting lost, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, it came back to that, not knowing the characters well enough. And it turned out that who we thought was the killer just didn't have it in that person. I'm not going to even say the sex, not to give anything away.
Well, Valerie said blah, blah, blah. That's 3 syllables. So I don't know if that was...
yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. But there is a certain accountability that comes with having a co-writer is equally invested in the story, isn't it? That you talked about, Lynne, you talked about writing that solo series and not having someone to kind of ping things off of, which can be freeing, I'm sure. But at the same time, there's no one there to tell you that you're taking a wrong left turn.
True. That is, well, you have the editor. So.
Yeah.
Right.
The editor does that. Good job of that, yes. But no, you're right. I mean, I think there's always pros and cons to every one, but I think the pros far outweigh the cons as far as I'm concerned.
We love it. We love being able to knock things off of, bounce things off of one another, and it's so helpful, I think.
Oh, completely, yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people would love to hear about the physical writing process. How do you guys hand off the writing duties?
So our process has evolved over time, and what we used to do is assign chapters and then swap them and give feedback, and just kind of go along that way. Now we even split chapters, so we really write scenes. And we talk every day, and we decide who's writing what, and we also give each other the freedom. Of course, if I was going to write one thing, if all of a sudden I'm inspired to go in a different direction, that's totally fine, because we know that we're going to be editing and rewriting over and over again. So we don't ask permission. Like sometimes a new character will just appear, or something will happen, and we'll discuss it as we're FaceTiming later in the day. And the great thing that on this third book that we're writing, I don't know why we never thought of before. I was writing a scene one day, and I just got bored of it. And I emailed it to Valerie and said, would you finish this? And she said, sure. And it came back, and it was great. And so now we'll do that. I mean, and it's really great if you're tired of it to be able to give it. And for the other person to get a scene that's already started is a lot of times easier than having to start with a blank page. So we really share all of it. We edit it together. And by the time it's finished, one sentence could be written half by me and half by Valerie.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll go back and read it and think, which one of us wrote this?
Right.
Don't you do that too?
I love that. I have a couple of friends who co-write together, Jamie Castle and Rhett Bruno, and they also write standalones, but when they write their collaborations, it's like a third voice. It's neither Rhett nor Jamie, and it is a third entity. Do you guys find that to be true for you? Do you feel like that Liv has a different voice than each of you separately does?
Yeah, definitely.
I think so.
Yeah,
I do. In fact, it's interesting. We were at an event the other night, and Lynne mentioned a psychologist friend of hers who gives us so much great feedback, and she was there, and I was talking to her afterwards, and she said, I can tell who's written what. And I said, really? And I won't tell you, the details, but I guess she knows you well enough. And
right, not so much from the style, but probably more from the content.
Yes.
Like if
Yes,
a certain,
exactly.
a certain, sentence that might come out of someone's mouth, and
Right.
she's like, oh, that's.
Yeah.
And I think Lynne, our sister-in-law, can tell as
tell
well
too.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But definitely Liv. I mean, we joke and say, we're becoming one person.
Right.
Things we start doing the same things.
Be a good book.
Right. Maybe that'll be another one. Yes, Liv will take over. You will only see one person appearing. Right.
Well, there's something that we love about writers writing about writers, and if Liv becomes an entity and then kills off the two, well, that probably wouldn't be good.
No.
But yeah,
That'd be pretty awful. Yeah.
that'd be pretty. Scratch that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely love the new book, The Last Time I Saw You. It's out available everywhere now at hardcover, in ebook, Kindle edition, audiobook, however you love to get your summer reading. It's available everywhere now. Valerie and Lynne, it's been so much fun talking with you. If people are just learning about you and want to dig into more about what you do and follow along with new news coming up and all of that good stuff, is there a place where they can connect with you online?
Definitely. So we're very active on social media. Our website is livconstantine.com, and then we're on Instagram and Twitter as Liv Constantine too, and then also on Facebook, Liv Constantine Author. So we love hearing from our readers. And
Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you guys so much for taking time to come on the show today. We're going to send everybody to pick up their copy of The Last Time I Saw You and to connect with you online.
Thank you, Hank. This has been great.
It has. It's been so much fun. Thanks a million.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
7 men ran the farce. The 7 witch hunters. The court of Oyer and Terminer. They tortured and lied and mutilated and murdered. They knew those women up in Salem Village were no witches. Their true target was the coven hidden in their own midst here in Salem town. They meant to hang the innocent until the sisters surrendered. Did they surrender? Said Jason. No. Was that the wrong decision? To let innocent women die and save themselves? What do you think? Should the coven have fought openly? Created more hysteria by swooping in on broomsticks and casting spells over Salem? Should they have killed the judges? There are no right decisions. That is the horror of a witch hunt. Everything you do condemns you. Question the judge, thou art a defiant witch. Question his laws, you question the king, and thou art a treasonous witch. Question his superstitions, you question scripture, and thou art a blasphemous witch. Pity the condemned, you pity witches, and thy Christian mercy proves thy collusion with Satan. Witch hunters are not just bad lawyers practicing bad law. They are men who place the ends before the means. They choose their victim, a man, a woman, an entire race, and mark them for extinction. All evidence is damning evidence. All associations are damning associations. All infractions, and who among us is without sin, are unforgivable infractions. Their own failings and abuses of power are shrugged away as mere vigor in pursuit of the public good. A witch hunter will have you, by whatever means necessary. If he cannot find evidence, he will create evidence. He will entrap you and question you and distort what you say. He will walk you through the night until your feet bleed, strip you and stripe you, dress you in your own filth until you forget you are human. He will torture your friends until they betray you. And if anyone dares to weep at your hanging, he will drag them to Gallows Hill in the back of the next ox cart. Any man can be a witch hunter. All it takes is hatred and arrogance and the preening self-regard that proclaims, my deeds are always good because they are my deeds. The 7 judges of the Salem court were such men. But one witch stood up to them. She stood up to centuries of unchallenged murderous dogma and pronounced the magic word, no. They burned her for it.